Welcome to Kunst Hardware. In this video I'm going to test the first ever Chinese X99 dual socket motherboard. I have already tested almost every available single socket Chinese X99 motherboard, and now the time has finally came and I can test the dual socket variant from China. Let's start with the motherboard specification first. Full name of the motherboard is JingSha X99 Dual BQ36 version 1.1. The motherboard supports two Intel LGA 2011 version 3 Xeon CPUs. You can use Xeon E5-2640 series and Xeon E5-2650 series. V3 and V4 CPUs are supported. Xeon E5-1600 series are not working in dual CPU configuration, thus you cannot put two Xeon E5-1650 V3 for example, or 1620, 1660 or any other 16 series CPU in this motherboard. Well, technically you can put them, but they're not gonna work in a pair. The motherboard uses server C612 chipset from Intel. On the motherboard we have 4 memory DIMM slots for DDR4 for each socket. So in total there are 8 memory slots which work in octo-channel configuration when all of them populated with 2 CPUs. This means there are 4 memory channels per each CPU. Each memory slot is designated to its own memory channel of a CPU. The motherboard has 4 USB 3 ports and 2 USB 2 ports on the back side, as well as front panel connector for 2 USB 2 and 2 USB 3 ports, 10 SATA 3 ports, 2 4-pin fan headers for CPU fans, and 2 3-pin fan headers for the case fans. There is just one PCI Express X16 slot and 3 PCI Express X1 slots, as well as one PCI Express 3.0 X4 NVMe slot for SSD drives. On the back side there is also 2 gigabit LANs, Realtek 5.1 audio, and AST2400 onboard VGA adapter. Form factor of the motherboard is E80X. The precise size is 304mm by 300mm. This means this motherboard will not fit in a standard ATX case. You need expanded ATX case to put this motherboard in. The motherboard specification is quite unique, so to say. A lot of SATA 3 ports, but very few PCI Express ports, and also not too many USB ports. Anyway, let's go to the test results and see what kind of performance and what kind of features we can expect from this motherboard. Testing ports and slots on the motherboard, I have figured out the following. USB 3.0 ports work with no issues. I have performed my usual test, running Crystal Disk Mark with external Samsung T5 SSD drive. The system was responsive during entire benchmark, and the benchmark results were as desired. USB 2.0 ports also work with no issues. SATA 3.0 ports also work with no problem. NVMe slot works at the advertised speed, which is PCI Express 3.0 X4. I have tested the port with Samsung NVMe drive running Crystal Disk Mark. PCI Express X16 slot works as intended. I have tested multiple graphics cards, no issues were detected. Unfortunately, I do not have PCI Express X1 expansion cards, thus I cannot test 3 PCI Express X1 slots on the motherboard. Onboard VGA adapter also working with no issues. To enable VGA adapter on the motherboard, you have to manually switch a jumper on the motherboard. The jumper has 2 positions. 1-2 is to enable onboard VGA adapter, and 2-3 is to use external PCI Express graphics card. I also had to manually install Windows 10 drivers for the system to recognize what kind of graphics card it is. Even after driver installation, GPU-Z and CPU-Z do not provide very much information about the adapter. Probably it's not a very common adapter, but if you are building a server, you can use PCI Express X16 slot to install extra SSD drives and onboard VGA adapter as the video output. All 4 fan headers work with no issues. Rotation speed of 4-pin fans can be regulated. 3-pin fans are not recognized and are not adjustable. In HW monitor, one 4-pin fan is indicated as CPU fan, another one as sys fan, even though on the motherboard both of them are marked as CPU 1 fan and CPU 2 fan. Sound quality is okay, I did not have any complaints, but I'm not a musician. In order to make the sound card work, I had to manually install unofficial drivers for Windows 10. It looks like this audio chip does not have default Windows 10 drivers, and I had to install unofficial drivers from realtek.cz website. All links to download VGA and sound drivers will be in the video description. Both network ports are working with no issues. I have tested copying large files for about 3-4 GB through the network ports and did not find any issues. I have also performed Crystal Disk Mark benchmark on the network shared drive. In both cases, network ports worked well, system was responsive, and average speed was around 800 to 1000 megabits per second. Thus, this motherboard could be a perfect fit for some kind of a storage server or any kind of background job for video encoding, video decoding, or anything else which requires lots of CPU power and lots of storage. Now let's take a look at the motherboard features. First of all, Windows Sleep Mode is not supported on this motherboard. As I understand, Chinese designed this motherboard to use as a server, thus they did not bother to enable Windows Sleep Mode. Previously with the Chinese X79 motherboards, we had a problem that Windows Sleep Mode was enabled, but after you put your computer into sleep mode, the computer will never wake up and you have to make a hard reset. With this motherboard, Chinese decided to completely disable sleep mode, and it's not even possible to enable sleep mode in Windows Power Management menu. Linux is supported, booting from NVMe drive also works with no issues. Much to my surprise, this motherboard default BIOS actually lets you adjust memory timings and memory frequency. But memory frequency is limited to the default Intel specification of the CPUs, as we will find out a bit later. I have stressed this motherboard for around 1 hour with Prime 95, having two Xeon E5-2650 V3 installed. VRM temperatures were never exceeding 70 degrees Celsius and usually stayed around 60-65 degrees. I have finally got myself an infrared thermometer so I can measure real temperatures of the VRMs. In HW monitor, the temperature was indicated with -20 degrees Celsius offset, the same as with any other Chinese motherboard. Thus, the temperature you see in HW monitor, you can add 20 degrees Celsius and that's gonna be your real temperature. Anyway, anything below 70 degrees Celsius is absolutely safe, and in my case I had the worst possible scenario. There were no direct airflow over the VRM zone. Thus, I would say that the VRM thermals are very acceptable. For the extra notes, I can say the following. The motherboard refuses to start if just one CPU power cable is connected. Even if you have just one CPU installed on the motherboard, you have to connect two CPU power cables. And it does not matter which of the CPU power cables you connect. Initially, I have tried to use SSD drive with Windows installation, which I used for testing Huananji and Kllisre motherboards, but JingSha X99 Dual refuses to start. It seems like it has some kind of secure boot features, and if the system was not installed on this motherboard, it just does not see the EFI partition on the drive and refuses to start. This is very annoying. It also happened to me after I have flashed modified BIOS when I tried to enable Windows Sleep Mode. I had to go into the Windows recovery mode and restore the EFI partition, and only after that the motherboard finally booted up into Windows. Both of the VRMs are working even if you have just one CPU installed. I'm not sure how the power delivery is designed on this motherboard, but even if I have just one CPU installed, both of the VRMs are heating up. Thus, my speculation could be that both of the VRMs are supplying power to both of the CPUs. But I'm not sure, and this is just my pure speculation. Unfortunately, BIOS of JingSha X99 Dual is missing one very important feature for servers, and this is restore on AC power loss. Basically, if you have a server, you would want it to automatically start in case of power interruption. For example, something happens and there is a power outage and your server shuts down. After a while, the issue has got resolved and the power is back, and you would like your server to automatically boot up and start to serve its duties. Most, if not all, branded motherboards have this feature, and you can set up your motherboard to automatically start up if there was a power outage and then the power is back online. With JingSha X99 Dual, you unfortunately do not have such feature. I have reached out to the AliExpress seller where I have bought the motherboard. Unfortunately, he was not able to help me either. It is officially not supported to mix multiple different CPUs on one motherboard, but I still have tested E5-2640 V3 plus E5-2650 V3 on this motherboard. Obviously, it did not work. I have tested JingSha X99 Dual installing just one E5-2640 V3 and two 2640 V3 working in a pair. Maximum RAM speed is according to the Intel specification DDR4-1866, anything above that is just ignored. Turbo Boost is working properly with 1 or 2 CPUs installed. With one CPU I have tested the following RAM configuration. 64GB with 4x16GB DDR4-3000 CL16 worked at DDR4-1866 CL12 in quad-channel configuration. 32GB, 4 sticks of 8GB each DDR4-2400 ECC registered CL17 RAM worked at DDR4-1866 CL13, also quad-channel configuration. Turbo Boost Unlock is working perfectly fine with just one CPU installed. With the 2 CPUs installed, I have tested the following configuration of RAM. 128 GB of RAM with 8 sticks, 16GB each DDR4-3000 CL16 worked at DDR4-1866 CL12 in octo-channel configuration. Each CPU had 4 channels of RAM populated. 128 GB of RAM with 4 sticks of 32GB each DDR4-2400 ECC registered CL17 memory sticks. Worked at DDR4-1866 CL12 in quad-channel configuration. 2 channels per CPU. Unfortunately, with the 2 CPUs installed, Turbo Boost does not work. Even though I have all the drivers installed and I have BIOS modified, as soon as I try to boot to Windows, system hangs. I have tested and retested multiple times. If I have just one CPU installed, everything is working fine. CPU is turbo boosting to the 3.4 GHz maximum turbo clock frequency. As soon as I install 2 CPUs, system fails to boot and hangs during the booting process. This is a very big disappointment. I will try to dig a bit deeper and maybe I will figure out a way how to make Turbo Boost Unlock work on this motherboard with 2 CPUs. Now let's move to the next CPU tested. With E5-2650 v3, maximum RAM speed was DDR4-2133 according to the Intel specification. Everything above that is just ignored. Basically the same behavior as we have already seen on all other Chinese X99 motherboards. Turbo Boost is working perfectly fine with just one CPU or 2 CPUs installed. With one E5-2650 v3, I have tested just one memory stick of 8GB DDR4-2400 ECC registered RAM working at DDR4-2133 CL15 in single channel configuration. With the 2 E5-2650 v3 installed, I have tested the following configuration. 2 memory sticks, 8GB each DDR4-2400 ECC registered RAM worked at DDR4-2133 CL15 in dual channel configuration, 1 channel per CPU. 128 GB of RAM, 4 sticks, 32GB each DDR4-2400 ECC registered RAM worked at DDR4-2133 CL15 quad channel configuration, 2 channels per CPU. 4 sticks, 32GB each DDR4-2400 ECC registered RAM plus 2 sticks, 32GB each DDR4-2600 ECC registered RAM worked at DDR4-2133 CL15 in hexa channel configuration, 4 channels on one CPU and 2 channels on the other CPU, for the total of 192GB of RAM. Thus, I can safely say that this motherboard supports at least 256GB of RAM. Unfortunately, Turbo Boost Unlock does not work with the 2 Xeon E5-2650 v3 installed, the same as with the E5-2640 v3. Again, I have tried multiple configurations, I have checked and rechecked everything I had, read a little bit of different forums. Still, I was not able to make a properly working solution with 2 CPUs installed on JingSha X99 dual motherboard. Now it's time to make some kind of a conclusion after testing JingSha X99 dual socket motherboard. The motherboard price is currently around 155 to 175 euros depending where you buy it. From the pros we have dual CPU setup, up to 256GB RAM, maybe even more, it looks nice, it has 8 memory channels, and it also has an onboard VGA adapter, as well as 2 network cards. But the motherboard also has quite a few cons. RAM overclocking and Turbo Boost Unlock do not work. Turbo Boost Unlock works only if you have one CPU installed, and if you're buying a motherboard which supports 2 CPUs, I see no reason why you shall use it with just one CPU. Temperature sensors are broken as usual, the displayed value has -20°C offset. It is not possible to monitor and adjust speed of 3-pin fans, Windows Sleep Mode does not work, only one PCI Express X16 slot, I have no idea why Chinese decided to have just one PCI Express X16 slot with a dual socket configuration. You have two CPUs, 40 PCI Express lanes each, and you can utilize just one PCI Express X16 slot. This is just bizarre in my opinion. The motherboard is also missing a very important feature for servers to restore its state on power loss. Also a few nitpicking points. Each CPU has 4 RAM slots, 2 of which are located very close to the CPU socket, and they may interfere with the CPU cooler depending on the memory stick heights and the CPU cooler you use. The 24-pin power connector is looking sideways. This means if you have a very tight case which has a wall right after the motherboard, you won't be able to connect power to your motherboard. There are some ATX cases which are slightly extended and you can install their extended ATX motherboard, but with such configuration you will not be able to connect power to your motherboard. This is very frustrating and very annoying, but it is what it is. My score for the motherboard is 6 out of 10. Even though the motherboard is working well and it's serving its purpose, I think it has very niche purpose. Some users might be happy with it, but for the most users it's kinda useless and pointless. Link to the AliExpress shop where I have bought the motherboard will be in the video description. Regarding the alternatives, you can always take a look at 100X99 TF, 100X99 F8, 100X99 8M, Kllisre X99 D8, Kllisre X99 D4, and JingSha X99 D4. All of the motherboards have been tested and approved by me, except JingSha X99 D4, which is currently coming to me and I'm going to validate it. From the looks, it seems to be a clone of Kllisre X99 D4 with a slightly better layout. Now, if you are an average consumer or a gamer or you're looking for a server setup and you do not need enormous amount of CPU power, let's compare JingSha X99 Dual with Kllisre X99 D8 motherboard and see what kind of performance and features you can get for about the same price. For JingSha X99 Dual, I have picked two Xeon E5-2640 V3s, which gonna cost 140 euros. 8 sticks of Kllisre DDR4-2400 8GB each for 64GB of RAM in total for around 210 euros. You will also need 2 CPU coolers, let's say 17 euros each, 32 euros in total. This entire set with the motherboard is gonna cost you around 544 euros. With Kllisre X99 D8 though, you can get E5-2640 V3, which currently costs around 202 euros. The same amount of RAM, 8 sticks of 8GB each, Kllisre DDR4-2400, 64 gigs in total, for 210 euros. Here though you will need just one cooler, which is around 17 euros. And this combo is gonna cost you 519 euros or something like that. With JingSha X99 Dual, you will get 16 cores, which would work from 2.6 to 3.4 GHz. With the Kllisre X99 D8, you will get 12 cores, which would work at frequency 3.5 GHz after turbo boost unlock. This means in most cases, Kllisre X99 D8 combo with E5-2690 will provide better performance, especially in the tasks which are utilizing just a few CPU cores. The tasks which utilize all of the CPU cores, the performance will be about the same. 16 cores clocked at around 2.6 to 3 GHz will be performing about the same as 12 cores clocked at 3.5 GHz. Thus, in this case, I see no reason why you shall go with the JingSha X99 Dual motherboard. If you need onboard VGA adapter, or maybe you need 2 network controllers, or maybe you need more SATA ports, using Kllisre X99 D8, you have so many expansion options. You have 2 extra PCI Express X16 slots and 2 more PCI Express X1 slots. You can always add extra expansion cards for VGA, network, or SATA, or USB ports, whatever. The only use case I see for JingSha X99 Dual, if you have some kind of a job which has to be done in background and it requires a lot of CPU power and a lot of storage. This could be, for example, like image processing or video encoding. When you upload all of your footage, all of your images, videos or whatever to your server storage, start process and go to sleep, or just leave the server running for hours and hours and maybe even days, converting your images from RAW format to JPEG or anything else, the same applies to videos. In this case, you can install two Xeon E5-2670 V3s with 12 core each. You will get 24 cores, 48 threads, 8 memory channels, and that's gonna be quite cost-effective background server to do any kind of such workloads. In all other cases, I would rather recommend going with a single socket configuration, unless Chinese come up with a better solution for dual socket X99 motherboards. And that's all I have for you for today. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, I hope you have enjoyed it. Goodbye.